Hi all, Nakey here. So today I'm going to be machining a piece of aluminium with my CNC router. Now I have a model 340C H80 and it's heavily modified, as you all know, because I bought this thing off eBay from China. It had shit electronics. I basically rebuilt the entire electronics package with good stuff. I replaced the 160 watt dentist drill arrangement with this 800 watt water cooled unit for a spindle drive. So I've got a decent machine at my hands now, just for doing minor work. Don't think this thing is going to machine out an engine block, she won't. So we're doing aluminium. We're going to be using a 3.1 millimeter bit. On eBay it was advertised as a 3mm bit. Guess what? It's 3.1. It has two cutting edges on it. So what you got to remember with these machines and machining aluminium is don't treat them like a router, treat them like a mill. So don't spin these things up to maximum RPM. You'll just melt the aluminium that you're trying to machine through. Keep them at a really slow RPM. For this particular job we're going to be using 1300 RPM, so she's going to be pretty slow. I'm also going to be using something a little different. I've been recommended, and I've got to tell you it works, methylated spirit as a lubricant, just to get rid of the swath, all the bits and pieces that come off the mill, the little chips, as we're cutting. And I've got to tell you it works really well. For those of you who are kind of questioning how I've pinned down my piece of material that I'm going to cut, this is a little tiny itty bitty baby mill and only came with very limited bits and pieces to tie stuff down with. Tell you what, if this was a nice 10mm chunk, this thing would be a hell of a lot bigger, and to be honest, I could basically pick up the entire machine with this. It's secured down so well with this. She's all in alignment, and I think it's going to be a good job. So let's start by giving her a bit of lubricant. Now I'm actually thinking of using a feeding system to feed the lubricant in, but for the moment I've just got this freaking straw that I'm getting the lubricant out of the bottle with. Let's start her up and see how we go. So we're using 700 not 700, we're using 1300 RPM. We're going to lower the mill, and our feed rate, for those of you who are interested, is about 15 millimeters per minute. So that's pretty slow. I might actually end up speeding it up, so I probably will do that now. So I've just sped it up to about 16 millimeters per minute. But the important thing is to watch the chips. So you can see it hitting in there, and you can see, and I apologize for the noise, so I'm going to speak up, that it's actually starting to, it's acting more like a mill, or a little micro mill, than a router. And that's what you want. If you've got a spindle drive that's got the torque, and these things will do it, then this is what I recommend you use. Now it's important when you see the swap peeling off like that to add a bit more lubricant, and that'll help things along. If it's too much swap coming off like that, that means the job will start to heat up. Just add a bit more. What happens is, if the job heats up too much, you'll actually get, and I don't know, yeah, hang on, I'll just add a bit more lubricant. So if your job heats up too much, you'll get this. Now I don't know if you can see that, the aluminium is actually stuck or melted onto the bit. So this is a useless bit now, as opposed to something that cuts and it has the swap coming off nicely. So there's a bit more lubricant there. Now this is going to be done in two cuts. I'm doing 2 millimeters a piece. And it's almost think it's a little fast halfway through. We could probably speed her up a touch more, so we're going to speed it up to about 18 millimeters per minute. Add a bit more lube. And she's nearly through. And as you can see, that's cutting away quite happily. The only thing that's sticking the bits there is the amount of methylated spirit I'm using. But they're nice consistent chunks that are coming off. Nothing's getting too hot so that I can touch that easily. It feels quite cool still, and we're nearly done with our first cut. So what's going to happen now is the machine's going to pop up and come back. But before it does that, I'm just going to hit it with the vacuum cleaner, and this might be a bit loud. So you can see now, that it's a nice clean cut. The bonus with using something like methylated spirits is this stuff dries up really nicely, doesn't leave a residue, so you can actually vacuum it up quite happily if that's what you're using. So we're just going to pop in a bit more lube, methylated spirits, and it'll pop in and cut that next piece off. Here we go. You can see it's acting like a mill. It's like really slow. So once again, there's like 1300 RPM working away. I probably could even go slower or make the feed rate a little faster. As a matter of fact, let's try that now. We're going to speed it up. So we're doing nearly 20 millimeters per minute. And this is at the point where you can actually hear the machine reverberating a bit. So she's kicking up a bit of a stink. This is where, I mean, as good as the spindle drive is, you'll notice that the machine just hasn't got the stability to keep it sort of like in check. To keep the whole thing like routed where you want it. But that's alright, because the tolerances we're using today aren't that bad. So we don't need to worry about the machine being like, you know, totally like exactly to the thousandth of a millimeter in plumb. And we'll just keep adding a bit of lubricant as needed. So we're about halfway through the second cut now. I'm actually pretty pleased with the way this is going. If I had a drip system to drip in like methylated spirits, I think this would be an absolute winner. And like I said, at the end of the day, the methylated spirits just dries up and you can vacuum all the swath up without a problem. Right, well, unfortunately I ran out of space in my memory card before the job was finished. But here's what we ended up with. Very pleased with this. It's a good cut. Let's have a bit of a zoom. Now, these are like very cheap tooling I got off eBay, but it's a very clean cut. Bit of sharpness to this, and on the underside, of course. But you know, a bit of sandpaper will fix that up quite well. Now, I'm not an expert on machining aluminium, and this is just my interpretation of how I think I should do it. And there are dudes in this world who know a hell of a lot more than I ever will about machining aluminium, but this is how I do it. And this is how I do it on a CNC router. So it's not a milling machine, it's a router. And to be honest, I think I've done a pretty good job for it. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching.